Hello, I'm Suzy Nightingale from the Perfume Society, and I have the privilege of being here with Geza Schoen from Escentric Molecules. And we are going to be talking about a very exciting new launch, number 5. So it's Molecule 05 and Escentric 05. And this is, when was the 4 released? Was it last year?
No, 4 was released probably 3 years ago.
Gosh, it's that long.
Yeah.
So this is really new.
It was about time to do the next pair. Yes, and only when we feel ready that the molecule is really worth exposing to a bottle itself and give it to the public, then we would say, okay, we have something here.
We have something that's worth.
Not before that.
Yeah, because I think something that we get a lot of feedback at the Perfume Society is there are so many fragrances out there, and there are brands who release 50 a year and expect people to keep up with all of those fragrances, and you can't. First of all, you couldn't love all of those, but you can't give the time to them that you need to spend to make sure that they're really special.
Impossible, I think. I think anything more than 10 really of a brand becomes arbitrary. I mean, yeah, you could smell every single bottle they've made, but to me that belittles or waters down the choice also a brand can make. Instead of launching 20 fragrance, why don't you just launch 2 you really like and you're really convinced of, which is why certainly we will not have ever 20 different fragrances.
And that's the way fragrances were released in the past. They had that time to give them air, to give people a chance to get used to them, to live with them,
exactly.
also to work on them.
Totally, I couldn't agree more. Products were given time to settle and to become known, and this particular time some products would need is not available anymore these days, which is why, well, yeah, in the niche market, of course it is, but the bigger companies, I mean, every year a new women's, a new men's, and then they extend these names of these fragrances into the ridiculous. So quite glad that we can play in niche world. Yeah.
So just to explain, I'm sure there can't be many people out there who haven't heard of Escentric Molecules, who haven't tried it or know someone who loves the brand. But for those who perhaps don't know everything about the brand, can you explain why you thought it was important to highlight aroma molecules and the synthetic side of things?
Sure.
Which nobody else was doing at that time at all.
I mean, it all started in 1990 when I joined Harman & Reimer, Simrise these days, and I was in August 1990, and I just entered this room which would offer all the single molecule ingredients, all the aroma chemicals, and I had a scale, and they said, here, help yourself, go ahead, sort of play around. And at some stage, probably just a few days later, I smelled Icy Super, and that was an absolute eye-opener to me at the time, because I mean, before I had smelled the ingredient on its own, I knew it from compositions where you could smell that it was in there, because it was always, ever since the ingredient was made by IFF, it was always a spectacular ingredient. Yet there was this ductus, this thought of, it's an ingredient, but we have thousands of other ingredients. You always have to put them together, and that was something I didn't quite understand, because ever since I smelled Icy Soup, I thought this is just so good on its own.
Yeah.
And why would you want anything else with that? Because that has such an allure.
And it's so complex on its own. I think this is something that people who haven't had the privilege of being in a perfume laboratory or smelling the ingredients on their own, you don't realise how complex they are. You think, oh, well, they don't work unless you've got 100 other things with it. But when you smell it, you think, you could wear that totally on its own, because it's got such a character. Yeah.
In fairness, it has to be said that I would think 99.5% of all the molecules actually need the help
Something
of others
else
around it, because they can smell quite linear and very one direction. But then there are a few which actually have this multifaceted, various directions within one molecule. And this was when I actually tried Icy Super for the first time. It must have been October, November 1990, when I gave this to a friend of mine. We went to this bar in my hometown, and he just had one drop here, one drop there, and we just stood there with, probably a beer. And took 10 minutes, and then this woman stopped right in front of us and said,
"What are you?
You smell so good here." And then this friend of mine was saying, "Oh, it's me, but you have to talk to him." And so I spoke to her, and it was interesting what she said, because she liked fragrances overall, she said, but she liked Fahrenheit and Tresor. So Fahrenheit men's, you know, woody, spicy, musky, fresh and leathery, and Tresor, you know, very fruity and sweet and floral and powdery and girly.
Very different.
But both had a big chunk of Suzy Super.
Interesting.
That was
she was
what probably
connecting with it.
Yeah, that was already what linked it for her, even though she didn't know anything about the ingredient side. I guess, that's just my guess, but I mean, it was her who told me this, and she was the one who stood in front of us and said, "You smell so nice." So ever since then, I mean, I was shocked, because I had no idea. It was just like a wild trial. You know, I just gave this to this friend of mine, and within 10 minutes in this bar, this girl just couldn't help herself but asked. So that was the start, and I remember I also gave it to the guy from Diesel in '94 when I worked on the first Diesel fragrance, and you know, I had no desire to do this molecule thing on my own back then. I tried to become a perfumer to actually make fragrances and to learn how to do that.
Sure.
So, and the guy from Diesel actually said he even thinks that's even for Diesel a bit too far-fetched. And Diesel being the coolest company in the world back then. So with that I thought, okay, well, you know, fair enough. So then it took another more than 10 years to then for us to do.
That long.
Yeah.
Wow.
So from the idea when I noticed this is really a weapon, this is like a bomb.
We've got something here.
To when we launched it, another 15 years passed.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a good percolating period. So can you tell me that in 05, the molecule that you're highlighting is the Cashmeran, which I think was developed by IFF in the 70s.
Yes.
What was it about that molecule that you thought deserved its own fragrance?
I thought it actually does qualify to become a molecule, because when you look at all the other four we did before, they all play within the woody family. To me, that's my personal impression. Woody notes are the most sophisticated we have in perfumery, because they're neither really sweet nor sticky nor sort of girly, fruity, you know, sugary.
Comforting and sexy at the same time.
Exactly. To me, they're the most sophisticated ingredients we have. So, Suzy Super, cedarwood, amboxan, yes, ambery, but also dry and woody and mineral. 3, vetyl acetate, a very fine vetiver ingredient. Number 4, javanol, as to me the most interesting, sophisticated sandalwood chemical we have. And 5, Cashmeran is bit of a double-headed something, because yes, it has these woody notes, but it also has some sort of a musky note. So you have the soft creaminess of musks together with this dry, slightly piney, little fruity dryness in one. That's Cashmeran, and it's been widely used in all sorts of fragrances.
Sure.
So I used it with, I think, nearly 15% in the fragrance, which was more than enough to give it that sort of character feature, sitting next to all sorts of other things, obviously, because Escentric is always the homage to the molecule, so it has the right to become a bit more complex.
So you're using other things in the Escentric that highlight the molecule, that do something with it, that work with it in a symbiotic way. What ingredients did you choose and why?
The molecule always dictates where the fragrance is going. That's very clear. I don't have to look at anything else. So I was actually smelling Cashmeran for about 2 to 3 months. I always had it on my desk, so I watched it, you know, like took days and days to actually, so it comes completely off the blotter. And so I had various phases when I looked at it through a long time, until one morning I thought, okay, I've smelled this stuff enough. I have so many attributes collected for this. And I looked at it and I thought, of course, it has this particular creamy dryness of the woods in the summer when the sun's been sort of drenching all the plants and the trees and the, till like almost the resins come out of the woods.
I love that it's so pictorial for you. You can actually place yourself somewhere.
I think so, yeah, totally. And again, as I said, the molecule dictates the direction. So then it was clear it had to have something to do with the dry summer. So, okay, making a summer fragrance, yet there are already lots of summer fragrances, but nearly all of them play in the same direction. They're super fresh and they all have these aquatic notes.
Yeah,
like
which are
cologne,
quite dated in some ways. It's makes me think of the 90s.
Exactly, it's been done. So ever since Liz Claiborne and L'Odyssée pour Homme and then Acqua di Gio, so we know these aquatic notes, and they always smell very synthetic. So this is why over the period of time when I worked on Escentric 05, I tried again and again and again at all the stages how the fragrance developed. I tried aquatic notes. I kicked them out at the end. I couldn't bear it.
Can't make it work.
It smelled like toilet cleaner and air freshener, and I was really against that.
That's not good.
So coming from this dry, resinous sun wood theme, I obviously needed a top note for the fragrance, which evokes freshness and summer, and so I looked at various citrus notes sitting next to some spices, because the Mediterranean in particular, rosemary and laurel would be two things I find very typical for this. Cypress is another one, and then juniper with it, because juniper is an all-time favorite of mine, and it's probably the cleanest, most sophisticated pine note, if you like, because pine needle oil itself is a bit sort of body dust and sauna, so that's taken
and kind of takes over everything else around it rather than working in combination.
Exactly. So once you smell the typical pine note, it's a bit like, oh,
it punches you in the face.
It's sort of technical,
and
so the cypress together with the juniper make up for the missing straight pine note in there, together with the laurel and the rosemary, and you have the citrus, so this is sort of the top note, and it leads into a transparent floral part which is made of magnolia bud, orris and hedione, and there's a bit of jasmine, absolutely, because jasmine is, you find that in the Mediterranean and
that always makes me feel like sunlight as well, sort of piercing through.
Absolutely. It's very friendly, very happy. And so then you get already into the dry down, which is obviously 15% of Kashmiran sitting next to some vetiver, even some ambroxan, labdanum, mastic as a balsamic ingredient, which is very close to my heart. And that's it. At the end of the day, the formula is actually quite short, around 30 ingredients. That's it.
Is that important to you to have a shorter formula, or does it not matter? It depends.
I mean, there are fragrances in the market, they are just hugely complex, and they still fulfill all the needs you want, which is like, longevity, radiance, beauty in a bottle. But it's like with cooking, the lesser ingredients you actually need to come up with a delicious meal, the better.
Yes.
You can't make a curry each time you're doing sort of this. And so that's why, yes, the shorter formula, and I think most perfumers would agree on that, the more overview you have of what you're doing. And if you add something at some stage where you think something went wrong, you can look at the formula and actually probably find out what it is, what disturbs now. So yes, short formulas are a good thing, I think.
And do you think people are coming around more now to the idea of even talking about synthetic chemicals aroma chemicals in fragrances? Because for so long it was kind of seen as perfumery's dirty little secret, when in fact these are incredible inventions that have changed the world of perfumery, that have been used for years but were not championed until you championed them. So do you think the public perception is changing now?
Yeah, I think there's more of an openness towards this. Of course, still till these days, everybody thinks, oh, only nature is great, and if it's natural, then it's good. And quite the opposite is sometimes the case. There are certain essential oils, they contain certain things, which is what makes them actually, you know, the IFRA says you can't put that on skin anymore. They cause the allergies. So what you do these days, either you fractionize certain essential oils, which is you can take out certain parts of an essential oil, just cut it out if you like, and you are left with the rest of the product, which makes them very interesting. Or you actually, well, you can't use as much of the natural product, and then you have to synthesize it with, you know, the replacements of a natural product, which is, as you can imagine, never as good as the natural product.
Exactly.
So the awareness to actually chemicals, funnily enough, that idea clearly came while I was living in London in the early 2000s, when I remember there was a huge trend. Everything went organic. You know, any supermarket you went to, organic.
Suddenly everything was organic.
And I thought, okay, I'll just go the opposite. I love this organic. Let's go chemical. So with this in mind, the whole idea of actually being honest as well as being open enough to everyone, saying, listen, darling, you know, it's not just natural products in your perfume. 95% of it is always chemical. So let's highlight this.
And those naturals are chemicals as well. They are forms of chemicals. They're natural chemicals, but they are still chemicals, and they can cause more damage if you put them straight on your skin. A lot more people are allergic to them, and often they're actually not that great for the environment.
And you can also go out and give those just purely natural perfumes a sniff. And some of them is interesting, but the problem is, if you have a product which is only made of naturals, it'll always have this really fatty, greasy ending.
And I think they're very flat very often. They stay close to the skin. And while it may smell pleasant, I think it's very difficult to go out and find an entirely natural perfume that smells like a finished fragrance, because it is those aroma chemicals that boost things. It radiates, it makes it last longer on the skin, and they're not just replacements, they are actually making the fragrance better. I've talked to perfumers before, and I know you've mentioned this before as well, that it's like the bone structure of a fragrance. So yes, the naturals can work brilliantly within that, but you need that structure often of those aroma chemicals to hang everything else from.
Agree. It's like, you know, as I said, most of these chemicals, they're very linear, so you can really only get one particular effect with one chemical. So that's why most of these chemicals need more next to it, so they can emphasize together something voluptuous and complex and beautiful. But a natural consists always of various ingredients, naturally. So if you have lots of these chemicals and then you add some of these naturals for complexity, that works. So you have the working side of the chemicals, which give you lasting radiance and some other aspects which you need in a fragrance, or you want in a fragrance. And with the natural notes, you give it the complexity.
Fantastic. Well, we cannot wait until these are out. When is 05 launching in the UK?
I think mid-March at Harvey Nichols.
Amazing. Well, make sure you keep on top of our website for more, and we'll be sending out bulletins to our subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed, please do so at theperfumesociety.org. And thank you, Geza, so much.
You're welcome. Thanks.